Welcome to Sincerely Me, a podcast about self-discovery and inner work so you can cultivate a deeper relationship with yourself and show up more fully in your work and life. My name is Tallia and I'm honored to be your host. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today's conversation is all about pursuing your purpose. When I was thinking about who I wanted to have a conversation with on this topic, Katie immediately came to mind. So Katie and I worked together. I had the privilege and honor of being her coach a couple years back when she was in a career transition, in a bit of a rut, trying to figure out what was next for herself on her path. And she came to mind because I've come to learn and through conversations with Katie since then, have loved how openly and honestly she shares about her journey and what it looked like as she was pursuing her purpose and really figuring out how she wanted to show up in the world through her work. And more importantly, she's very vulnerable and open about the messiness in the process. She's not here to pretend like it happened overnight, like her business was an overnight success, like the path to figuring out what was next was easy. No, she's here to share all of it. And I love that because I think those are the parts of the stories that don't go as that aren't told as much, and those are the parts that make us human. Those are the parts that are real, and those are the parts that are hard. So I love that she shares her story, and you'll hear a lot about it on the episode today. For some context, she is now working as the founder of Make and Do Community, where they host creative community workshops that gather people to learn from local makers and doers. They believe that creating and making things with your own hands alongside other people is more meaningful and a little bit more fun, and I totally agree. I've been to several of Katie's workshops. One was a sourdough bread making workshop, one was a floral arranging workshop, and one was a cheese board workshop. All of them were super fun, and I have taken what I've learned into my day-to-day life because I love cheese and I make a lot of cheese boards. I love flowers. I make a lot of flower arrangements, and I love bread. I can't say that I've made much sourdough bread because it takes a lot of time, but nonetheless, I love the work she's doing, and I love watching her journey, hearing about her journey, and being able to share her story with you all. For you to know, in terms of the episode, we will be jumping straight into Katie sharing about where her journey started. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Katie.
So I had just gotten married to my husband, Ben, and we had just bought a new house and we had moved in, and I very clearly remember kind of the general time frame that you and I met because I just felt super stuck. Kind of rewind to October of 2016, so about 6 months prior to you and I kind of connecting. I had left my job in the corporate world. I was just, I was not happy. I didn't feel fulfilled. And there was just this really big void that I didn't really know how to explain. And so I left where I was at with no backup plan, which is something that I have never done. It was completely outside of my comfort zone. And I really took the time. I was just really searching for what is it that I'm meant to do right now. I mean, it would have been great if I kind of stumbled upon the answer of what is, what's my life's work supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? What's my purpose? But I was happy with just what's going to be the next thing for now. And that really kind of set into motion about a 1.5 year journey that I really took to understand who I was, what were my strengths, what was I gifted at doing, and really just what energized me and brought me to life. And that's where you and I kind of connected through coaching. And I just remember feeling that like little spark of hope. Like, I don't know what's next, or I don't know what's going to come from even just the coaching experience that I had with you. But it was a step in the right direction. It was a movement. It was something was happening. And I had really been kind of stagnant for several months. And I knew that there had to be more. I knew that there was more to life than just sitting and waiting and feeling stuck and helpless. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I was when we found each other. And I can't believe that here we are talking on, your new podcast about where I am a year into my business. It's insane.
I know. It's absolutely incredible. And I want to take some time to pull out some parts that you just shared there. The first is an experience that I think is super relatable and honestly very common, just not talked about much. And it's this experience of being at a point in life where you have all the things you wanted, right? Like you found your partner, you have a beautiful house, you have a beautiful dog, you have this corporate job, and from the outside all is well. Like I've checked all these boxes and I should be happy. Am I crazy for not feeling happy?
Yeah.
There's such a dissonance between what is being perceived as reality versus what I'm actually feeling on the inside. And I think it's so beautiful that you had the opportunity to take the time, and that's something that I think one of the biggest challenges is that people don't know how or where or when to find the time to really take a step back, give themselves time to like figure it out. And to your point, it's a lot easier to just think about short term, okay, what's next? I got to get another job. Let's rebound into something quickly versus, okay, yeah, I could do that. Or I could really take this time and ask myself, like, what is the life's work here? Like, yes, there is the bucket of job, but there's also the bucket of purpose and life's work and something bigger than whatever could be next if I fell into what came easily. And that takes a lot of courage. So that I know for us was a big topic in coaching, was the courage it takes to really face the reality that you're experiencing internally and say, I'm not happy, and I do need to explore, and I do need to face this, and I do need to be held accountable and express and voice it and share my story. And the second is the just the faith. I know faith played a big part for you in this whole process, and having faith and just trusting in the process, even on the days where the tears were flowing, and on the days where it felt like nothing was ever going to change. You had such a strong sense of belief and faith in the process that it was eventually going to lead you to a better place.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to go back to what you said about, checking those boxes and on the outside, seemingly having everything and, just getting married and the house and the dog and the job. And I think that it's so easy to look at the outside. I think social media plays such a big part in that too, of seeing all of the wonderful things and everybody's happy. And it's a very curated feed of unrealistic expectations. And it's super easy to fall into the comparison trap of, well, this person's got this and that person's got all, X, Y, and Z. And I'm over here, and I think looking back now, I think one of the things that really helped me in the time of feeling like, okay, there's got to be something more here, was just giving myself permission to want more.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I think that it's so common to, be grateful for what you have and, that you're greedy for wanting this or that. And I feel like it's really all in, the way in which you go about it, I think. And for me, knowing that I had served kind of my time with, the kind of the corporate scene and working at different companies, like that time had come to a close and it was time to move forward in my life and move on to the next chapter, which means something different or something more. And it can be really easy to fall into that trap of like, well, no, like I you can be grateful for what you have and want something more. I think that those things are not separate from each other. And I feel like it's really, you hear a lot about, well, don't be greedy and what you're asking for and this and that. But knowing what your heart is and knowing, where you want to end up and where you see yourself, there's a process in between, point A and point B. And it all starts with just saying yes to moving one foot in front of the other. And that looks different for so many people, but there's so many layers of everyone's life. You've got your personal stuff going on, you've got your professional stuff. And I think everybody we're hardwired to have these desires to, want what's best. And I think giving yourself permission to kind of want more and to figure out, like, what does it look like? What would it look like in order for me to get to that point? Right. And so for me, yeah, there were several different steps to take from kind of where I was of just feeling completely stuck to, launching a business that I was not expecting to do. And each step in the process, I didn't know what was coming next. I just tried, and I didn't always get it right, but trying to live in the moment and live in the present and give myself fully to what I was currently in. Like, what is that next step that I'm doing right now to get me to kind of that next stepping stone? So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a process and a journey. And there were several parts, if I'm honest, of just kind of that in between that I wish people talked more about that, because I think that is probably one of the most relatable parts of my story. And so many stories that I've heard is the in between, when you have no idea what's going to happen next. Is what I'm doing right now, like, is it meaningful? Does it matter? Is it going to be what gets me to the next thing? And there's all these little risks that you take, I think, in the waiting, because, saying yes to something, it may not be what gets you to the next thing, and that's okay. But the in between and the waiting can be really messy. And that's one of the things I learned. I think one of the most valuable lessons is that it's completely normal. It's part of the process. And I think there's kind of a stigma around that. Not a lot of people talk about the messiness, and you're going to have those low points and those low times, but knowing that kind of the peaks and the valleys are part of the process and that everybody goes through them and experiences them. I feel like knowing that helped me feel not so alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just be more kind to yourself throughout the process. Self-compassion, I know, plays such a big part in this type of work. And there's an element too of, you call this period of like the waiting being the in between for when you're feeling stuck and not sure what's next to the point where you've figured it out. What's interesting about that period too is that even if nothing's changing on the outside and no, external quote unquote results have been achieved, there's so much happening internally. The inner transformation, even if you're not in the new business or not in the next job, it doesn't mean nothing's happening. That's the distinction to make too. Like, there's so much that you don't see or won't necessarily see a direct result of immediately, but it's trusting that, just by thinking about the things you let yourself think about, and just by acknowledging and allowing yourself to want more, that was a part of the process of change, right? I think it's, a lot of the narrative is, well, change won't happen until I XYZ, when really the change is incremental. It's the daily thoughts, the daily actions, the baby steps, the one foot in front of the other that really ends up building into what ultimately creates change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree, because, I lived that for so long, and I live it still every day, but the changes were very subtle. And it's not until, I kind of came out of that transitional season, that season of waiting, that I was able to look back and say, I didn't notice it then, but these, like what you were saying, these small changes internally were happening through the process. And, it's the thing about waiting, right? Sometimes when you're in the moment, it just sucks and you can't see kind of what's on the other side of the waiting. But that's really where my faith sort of really helped get me through that, because, I was kind of clinging to something that was bigger than myself, and knowing that I am being prepared for something bigger. I don't know what it is, but I just have to trust that this is all going to work out and this is not going to be wasted.
Yes, because that's so much of the narrative when you're going through that period of transition, trying to figure out, what is next? What is my purpose? What does my life's work? What is it going to look like? The narrative sometimes becomes time is being wasted, and just the guilt that comes with it. And to your point, if someone came to you and saw your life today and saw this beautiful business that you've built, and you're 1 year into it, yeah, they wouldn't necessarily know about the year where you spent waiting, figuring it out, and trying different things and testing different ideas and feeling lost. That isn't given voice to that often. And I love that you share your story and all parts of it, because every single part was necessary to get to where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to your point, it's so easy to kind of look at someone's success story, if you want to call it, like, oh, they've got this, they've got that. Everybody goes through those at some point or another. And it's easy to kind of tuck that away because it looks messy. At least mine did. And I have become such a huge advocate of especially sharing that part of my story, because every single time I have, people are like, oh my gosh, it kind of like gives them the freedom to share their mess too, and say like, I'm so glad that it's not just me. And I think it's really easy to kind of hold on really tightly to those, the messy in between, and not want to talk about it, and just look at all the, the high points and the successes. But, behind every awesome story or success, there are a lot of moments that a lot of hard work was poured into that, and some not so great moments as well. And I think it's really easy to skip over those for sure.
For sure. Yes. Okay. So 2 things that I want to tap into next. The first is, how did you eventually get to the decision in terms of what your life's work became and has become? The second is, I guess, suggestion I have for listeners. So if you're in that boat of feeling a little bit guilty about wanting more and wanting to give yourself that permission, going into a gratitude practice is the best way to attract more of what you want. Because when you're expressing gratitude, what you're doing is showing appreciation. And going into a gratitude practice can be such an easy and actionable way for you all to start working through this process of being okay with wanting more, and really setting the intention towards what exactly you want more of, and kind of identifying how that's already showing up for you in your life. So if you want more money, for example, how can you show appreciation for and gratitude to money in a way that affirms how it's already showing up for you? It's not something you don't have. It's something that you do have. And yes, you might want more, but what is it already bringing into your life? How are you already building a relationship to it in a way that creates positive energy, instead of an energy of like lacking and depletion and not enough? And, so just a thought I had there for anyone who's listening. If you want to start moving into that space of, again, abundance and really wanting more, a simple gratitude practice can be an easy way to start that process.
Yeah. And that really resonates with me so much for a lot of different reasons. But one of the things that helped me practice gratitude is just speaking it out loud, thanking my husband for giving me the courage to kind of say, all right, I am going to leave this thing that I've been comfortable in for so long, and I'm going to step out into a place I've never been before, which is without a backup plan, and really just explore like what that looks like. And I think having that encouragement and that support was huge for me, because had I just been on my own, without that, I don't know if I would have ever done it, or if I did, it probably would have been much later. So speaking it out loud, like the things that I was grateful for, really helped me. I'm also really big in journaling, have kind of my quiet time every morning, and really just writing out like the place that I'm in right now, the good, the bad, the ugly, because it's all part of it. And I think just acknowledging it and calling it out for what it is was really helpful and healthy for me. I was recently watching Brene Brown's Netflix special, A Call to Courage, and I love her so much. I feel like everything she says, I'm like, yep, like it just resonates so much with me. But one of the things she was talking about was how people who are able to fully lean into joy are the ones that practice gratitude. And that really just kind of, when I heard her say that, I rewound it about 8 times just to make sure I could get every single word of that down. And I feel like it's one of those things where, she talks about how when we lose our capacity for vulnerability, we put off joy. And it can be really scary to let ourselves kind of feel joy, because it means that there's an opportunity for that joy to be kind of snatched out from underneath us. And so practicing gratitude was, in her research that she has done in her life, the people that can lean the fullest into joy are the ones that practice gratitude. And I want to practice it more.
It's so true. It taps into the whole narrative around how the path to purpose, pursuing purpose, figuring out what your life's work is. The reality of it is that it most likely for most people requires discomfort. It requires discomfort, and it also requires knowing that you deserve joy. And again, to her point, having the courage to find that for yourself.
Right.
And you sat in the discomfort in such a patient way. And I do want to now transition into, once you sat through it, once you did all this inner work and asked yourself the tough questions, went through coaching, talked to your friends and family, and felt supported by people around you, what led you to the business you now have today?
The actual moment came last February. We had a kind of an unseasonably warm weekend, and it had been a really long winter. It was just bitter and rainy and cold. And so this weekend came and it was sunny and warm, and I wanted to get out and kind of plant some flowers. And I don't know a ton about keeping anything alive, plant wise. And so I kind of jumped online and to really see like if there was some kind of workshop or class I could take around kind of gardening 101 or planting basics. And I couldn't really find anything. And I knew I wasn't the only one who had had that thought around my part of town. So, my next thought was, well, I'll just create my own. I've always loved gathering people. Having get-togethers and gatherings for one reason or another just brought me a lot of joy. And it was something I was good at. Logistics and planning just came really natural to me. And so within a few hours, I had about 30 friends that said, yeah, I'd be interested in that. And I found someone local that said she'd be interested in teaching. She's kind of an expert in that sort of thing. And so we planned this workshop to happen in May. So, 2 or 3 months down the road. And it took actually experiencing a problem that I couldn't personally find a solution to, created this light bulb moment of like, okay, I think that I'm onto something here. And it really sort of, the process just energized me and brought me to life, and kind of made me wonder what other topics, what other things would people want to learn about in a workshop setting. And so, that's kind of the big thing that happened, kind of experiencing a problem I couldn't really find a solution to, that led me to kind of build this business that really addresses the lack of kind of connectedness in our community through kind of a shared learning experience.
Yes, and I love this story so much, because the people you meet who have businesses that really feel authentic to who they are and who are super energized getting up every day, it's not some random idea they had that they thought could make money and that they ran with. It came out of a challenge, a problem, some pain that they personally faced and had to find a solution to, or had to move through. And having come at it from personal experience, can safely assume that, other people are probably needing this too, because I needed it and I found the solution and it worked for me. How can I now take this into the world and serve people from a place of knowing and understanding? Because it happened to me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The phrase I think a lot about is how pain births purpose, right? Like the challenges you've faced in your life, in my opinion, and there are a lot of different thoughts around this, but in my opinion, they're not random. If you could just take, again, the time and space to look at the timeline. Like, what are the events in your life that really challenged you, that pushed you, and how did you get through them? What solutions did you come to? What lessons can you pull from them, and who else needs to hear them? Like, that's why sharing our stories in life is so important, because it's not a coincidence that you've experienced the things you have. And if you could really tap into them, listen and observe and just connect the dots, so many of the answers you're looking for lie in your past experiences.
I completely agree with the idea of, the challenges and the things that we face that are less than desirable. It's kind of our response to those things that shape who we are. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but, you hear people say all the time, like, if things are easy, they wouldn't mean as much. And in sharing my personal story, over my life, every single really good thing, really significant, meaningful thing that has happened to me in my life has taken years to come by. And, my husband and my marriage is a perfect example of that. I prayed for him for so long, and I was 31 when we got married. And at that point, a lot of my friends they'd been married for a few years at that point. And so I appreciate those things so deeply because I fought really hard to get them. And I think that going through those things, honestly, it just makes you better prepared for the future and for your present even. I think it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. We've been talking about that, but kind of leaning into what is it that I'm called to do? Like, what is it that brings me energy? And honestly, what is it that challenges me? Because that's also part of it. And I think it takes a lot of courage to say yes to pursuing that. Just the fear of criticism. And, we were talking about Brene Brown and her Netflix special earlier. And, one of the things that she had said was, like, fear of criticism is so paralyzing that, we engineer smallness in our lives. And I mean, she said that and it just kind of knocked the wind out of me because I do that. And I've done that so much over my life. And I think, I'm finally getting to the point where I'm more comfortable knowing like what value I bring to the table and kind of fighting for my worth. And I think the fear of criticism can sometimes be so loud and so paralyzing that you might experience a problem and be able to create a solution, but we're scared. And it's so that is so normal. And it's one of those things I think so many people struggle with. But yeah, leaning into just saying, okay, yeah, like this has happened to me for a reason. And I think I'm supposed to do something about it.
I do want to ask you, now that you've kind of gone through this experience and found your path to purpose, what would you say, having pulled the lessons you've pulled from everything you've gone through, that it means to live a life of significance for you?
Connection. That is something that I thrive on. And I think we all kind of have this common desire for a sense of belonging and to be seen and known. And I think for me, living a life of significance means that I'm deeply connected to kind of the people in my circle, but also deeply connected to myself. I've learned so much about who I am and my heart and my motives through this process, and learned that I'm a lot more capable than I thought I was. And I think that's something that can resonate with a lot of people. And I feel like tapping into who I am and really embracing that and fully accepting that that's where I was in my life. And I was ready to kind of move forward. And I think that has brought me so much significance, truly kind of identifying my purpose, whether it's for the rest of my life or just for this season. I feel so incredibly blessed to have kind of identified this small piece that I can play in creating an impact in my community and with the different people that my business serves. The other piece to this is my faith. It's central to who I am, and it's something that is really important to me. So practicing that and creating space for rest. I think that's something that I'm slowly learning to incorporate into my life and my routine. And it's okay to just be still and to take time for yourself and to just turn things off, because we live in a culture and society that glorifies busy. And I did for a long time. And I was completely exhausted and just completely out of gas. And so that has really added to kind of feeling this significance in my life, and building kind of like a self-care plan around what are those pillars in my life, physical, spiritual, emotional, and kind of mental, and how can I take care of myself in all of those different aspects, and what does it look like to have a healthy balance. And I have by no means figured it out, but I'm working on it, and I think that's something that is slowly evolving over time. And yeah, I think that would be kind of what it means to me to have like a life of significance.
I love that. Something you mentioned too in that, Katie, was how, you've come to see that connection is kind of your mission and what drives you. And you've also acknowledged that it might look differently in 5 years, right? Like, you've created this beautiful business. It feels super aligned right now. It's energizing. It's how you want to be connecting with people and contributing to the world. That totally might change. This might not be forever, but the connection piece, that's forever. And it's just recognizing that a lot of things in life are temporary. How can you come back to yourself? How can you come back to things that keep you grounded, that are stable and that are certain? And again, for you, it's this idea of connection. And if and when anyone comes to a point where they're questioning again, what's next again, the connection piece will always be there. It's just going to maybe look a little bit differently in the way it's, packaged or presented to the outside world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, getting to this place where I'm at now, I couldn't have told you that this is exactly how these gifts and strengths that I have would play out. I mean, they already look so different than what they did 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. That actually creates a little bit of excitement. And, it can be a little scary too, but I'm choosing to hold on to to the excitement and the hopefulness of, these gifts that we all have. They're ever evolving. There's always some element of it that is changing and growing and developing. And also there is an aspect to kind of like a pruning or like a falling away from that. There are things that we have that don't serve us well anymore. And so it's okay to let some of those things go. And I think knowing and accepting and being happy with the fact that the things that you have now, the gifts that you have and how you practice them and how they show up in your life are most definitely going to look different in, a year from now, 5 years from now. And I think that's the beauty of having those strengths and those giftings, because seeing them grow and kind of morph into something different and something more specific, I think is a really beautiful thing. And it means we're growing. And I think that's really exciting to just kind of think through, like, what does the gift of connection look like in a year from now or 5 years from now? And yeah, it's exciting, and just being okay with the fact that it's temporary now and it will grow into something different in the future based on where I'm at and what I need.
Amazing. Okay. Well, then my last question for you is, again, something that I offer to all of the lovely guests who join me on the podcast. So if you could write a letter to yourself at any point in time, past, present, future, what point in time would you choose to go to, and what would you say to yourself?
Honestly, I think I would probably pick my present self. That's where I'm at right this minute. And, I would really say to myself, just be gentle. I am my toughest critic. And I think I set super high expectations for myself that might not always be realistic, and just giving me permission to be gentle with myself, and honestly just giving abundant grace, because I feel like if we can't extend that to ourselves, it's going to be really hard to extend that to other people. And so creating space for grace and, allowing myself to experience and feel what I'm feeling. And it's all kind of part of the process and part of this journey that I'm on. So yeah, that would definitely be my answer.
Awesome. And for anyone who is interested in writing a letter to themselves based on the themes and topics that came up in this episode, I would suggest writing a gratitude letter in the spirit of showing appreciation and giving yourself permission to want more. That could be a great place to start. So, writing a gratitude letter, whether it's to yourself or to somebody else, and sharing it if you so choose with the other person, with us at the podcast. If you want us to read it on next week's episode, we'd be happy to do so. Do you have any other thoughts or suggestions on any letters folks can write based on the episode, Katie?
There's something really powerful in honestly just writing down, whether it's a list or journaling or a letter, acknowledging just kind of where you're at in your current season, and where are those places where you want more, you want to experience more of this or more of that. I think there's just something really meaningful in acknowledging the place you're at, and also giving a voice to what it is that that you're wanting in the future, like for your future self. That was something that was really helpful for me. I'm a list maker. I love lists for everything, and it helps me feel organized, and it's really just a great way to like get all my thoughts down in one place. And that was something that really helped me when, especially kind of that in-between time and that waiting of, all right, what are the things that I know for sure? I know for sure where I'm at right now and these different emotions I'm feeling. And I know a little bit about where I want to go and where, I want to see myself in the future. And so honestly, kind of speaking life into those things and putting them on paper, I feel like makes it a lot more likely to kind of come to fruition if you give it a voice and you start somewhere.
Well, we hope that you all take us up on some of these exercises and practices to get a little bit closer to your path and feeling a sense of purpose in the work that you are doing. Katie, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and sharing your story with us. I am really excited to link all about you and the work you're doing in the show notes. So let people know, if you will, before I let you go, how to find you, how to contact you, and how to check out your awesome business.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I loved being on the podcast. I love the work that you're doing. I'm a huge fan of yours. And as far as how to get in touch with me, my business is called Make and Do. And you can find us on our website at makeanddocommunity.com. And then also on Instagram, I have the longest Instagram handle ever. It's at Make and Do Community.
All right, everyone. That was my conversation with Katie. I hope you enjoyed it. And my biggest takeaway from it really was that when we can accept where we are in the process and not resist whatever is happening, we're able to bring so much more ease into our day-to-day just with trust, like trusting that it's going to get us to wherever we need to get to next, and not wishing things were different. The more we wish things were different, the more resistance we create, the more we fight against our present reality, and the less present we're able to be, because we either want things to be the way they were, or we want things to be, or we want to just kind of jump through the mess and get to the end of the process. But it's in the process that true learning, growth, and transformation takes place. And it's not until we do that work that we actually get to see more clearly where we're meant to be. If there's anyone in your life who came to mind as you were listening, who's maybe sitting in their mess, sitting in their in-between, trying to figure out what's next, feel free to share this episode with them as well. And lastly, if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, welcome to Sincerely Me. I know it seems silly to do a welcome at the end, but I can't assume that you've listened to other episodes, so quick intro about me. My name is Tallia Deljoux. I am a career coach, obviously a podcast host, and a positive psychology expert. And I love supporting women on their paths, helping them figure out what it looks like to show up more fully in their work and life, teaching them how to stop playing small, teaching them how to uncover limiting beliefs and figure out what's holding them back so they can get out of their own way. If that resonates with you, I would encourage you to check out the Inner Work Circle. It's a year-long program for an intimate group of women who are ready to do the work, ready to get to know themselves, ready to dig deep, face their fears, connect to their desires, and speak up for what they want. So I will link that in the show notes for you. Enrollment is now open. I'm taking applications until mid-August. So take a look, and I would be honored and privileged to guide you on your journey. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you on next week's episode. Sincerely, me.